Hello, folks, and welcome to the AA Big Book Stories. Today we're going to be reading Chapter 2 of Part 2 of the Big Book Stories in the back of the Alcohol Anonymous book. Fear of Fear. This lady was cautious. She decided she wouldn't let herself go in her drinking, and she would never take that morning drink. I didn't think I was an alcoholic. I thought my problem was that I had been married to a drunk for 27 years, and when my husband found AA, I come to the second meeting with him. I thought it was wonderful, simply marvelous, for him, but not for me. Then I went to another meeting. I still thought it was wonderful, for him, but not for me. That was on a hot summer evening down at the Greenwich Village Group, and there was a little porch outside the meeting place on Sullivan Street. And after the meeting, I went out to the steps and found some air. In the doorway stood a lovely young girl who said, "Are you one of us Souses too?" And I said, "Oh goodness, no. My husband is. He is in there." She told me her name, and I said, "I know you from somewhere." It turned out that she had been in high school with my daughter. I said, "Aline, are you one of those people?" And she said, "Oh yes, I'm in this." And she walked back to the hall. I, for the first time in my life, said to another human being, "I am having trouble with my drinking too." She took me by the hand and introduced me to the woman that I am very proud to call my sponsor. This woman and her husband are both in AA. She said to me, "Oh, but you're not an alcoholic? It's your husband." I said, "Yes." She said, "How long have you been married?" I said, 27 years. She said, 27 years to an alcoholic. How did you ever stand it? I thought, now, here's a nice sympathetic soul. This is for me. I said, "Well, I stood it to keep my home together and for my children's sake." She said, "Yes, I know. You're just a martyr, aren't you?" I walked away from that woman, grinding my teeth and cursing under my breath. Fortunately, I didn't say a word to George on the way home. But that night I tried to go to sleep and thought, "You're some martyr, Jane. Let's look at the record." And when I looked at it, I knew I was just as much as drunk as George was, if not worse. I nudged George in the morning and said, "I'm in," and he said, "Oh, I knew you'd make it." I started drinking nearly 30 years ago, right after I was married. My first drinking spree was on corn liquor, and I was allergic to it. Believe me, I was deathly sick every time I took a drink. But we had to do a lot of entertaining. My husband liked to have a good time. I was very young and I wanted to have a good time too. The only way I knew to do this was to drink right along with him. I got into terrific trouble with my drinking. I was afraid I had made my mind up that I would get drunk, so I would never get drunk, so I was watchful and careful. We had a small child and I loved her dearly. So that held me back quite a bit in my drinking career. Even so, every time I drank, I seemed to get in trouble. I always wanted to drink too much, so I was watchful, always watching, counting my drinks. If we were invited to a formal party, I knew they were only going to have one or two drinks. I wouldn't have any. I was being very cagey, because I knew that if I'd take one or two, I might want to take 5 or 6, 7 or 8. I did stay fairly good for a few years, but I wasn't happy, and I didn't ever let myself go into my drinking. After my son, our second child, came along and became school age and was away at school most of the time, something happened. I really started drinking with a bang. I never went to the hospital, never lost a job, and I was never in jail. And unlike many others, I never took a drink in the morning. I needed a drink, but I was afraid to take that morning drink because I didn't want to be a drunk. I became a drunk anyway. but I was scared to death to take that morning drink. I was accused of it many times when I went to play bridge in the afternoon, but I really never took a drink in the morning. I was still woozy from the night before. I should I should have lost my husband, and I think the only fact that he was an alcoholic too kept us together. No one else would have stayed with me. Many women who have reached the stage that I had reached in my drinking have lost husbands, children, homes, and everything they hold dear. I've been very fortunate in many ways. The important thing is I lost my own self-respect. I could feel fear creeping into my life. I couldn't face people. I couldn't look them straight in the eyes. Although I had always been a self-posed, self-poised, brazen person, I'd brazen anything out. I lied like a trooper to get out of many scrapes, but I felt fear coming into my life and I couldn't cope with it. I got so that I had quite a bit of time, that I hid quite a bit of time, wouldn't answer the phone, and stay to myself as much as I could. I noticed I was avoiding all my social friends except for my bridge club. I couldn't keep up with any of my other friends. I wouldn't go to anyone's house unless I knew they drank as heavily as I did. I knew it was I never knew it was the first drink that did it. I thought I was losing my mind when I realized I couldn't stop drinking. That frightened me terribly. George tried many times to go on the wagon, and if I had been sincere in what I thought I wanted more than anything else in life, a sober husband and a happy, contented home, I would have gone on the wagon with him. I did try for a day or two, but something would always come up and would throw me. It would be a little thing like the rugs being crooked or any little silly thing that I think was wrong. And off I'd go drinking and sneaking my drinks. I had bottles hidden all over the apartment. I didn't think my children knew about it, but I found out they did. It's surprising how we think we fool everybody in our drinking. I reached a stage where I couldn't go into my apartment without a drink. It didn't bother me anymore whether George was drinking or not. I had to have liquor. Sometimes I would lie on the bathroom floor, deathly sick, praying I would die, and praying, as I always prayed to him when I was drinking, "Dear God, get me out of this and I'll never do it again." And then I'd say, "God, don't pay me any attention. Don't pay any attention to me. You know I'll do it again tomorrow." The very same thing. I used to make excuses to try to get George off the wagon. I'd get fed up with drinking all alone and bearing the burden of guilt all by myself, that I'd egg him on to drink and get started again. And then I'd fight with him because he had started. And the whole merry-go-round would begin on again. And he, poor dear, didn't know what was going on. He used to wonder when he'd spot one of my bottles around the house just how he could have overlooked this particular bottle. I myself didn't know all the places I had them hidden. We only had been in AA for a few years, but we are trying to make up for lost time. 27 years of confusion is what my early married life was. Now the picture has changed completely. We have faith in each other, trust in each other, and understanding. AA has given us that. It has taught me many things. It has changed my thinking entirely about everything I do. I can't afford resentments against anyone because they are the build-up of another drink. I must live and let live, and to think that one important word means so much to me. My life was always act and react. I never stopped to think. I just didn't give a whoop about myself or anyone else. I tried to live our program. It has been outlined to me one day at a time. I try to live today so that tomorrow I won't be ashamed when I wake up in the morning. In the old days, I hated to wake up and look back at what last night had been like. I never could face the next morning, and unless I had some rosy picture of what was going to happen that day, I wouldn't even feel like getting out of bed in the morning at all. It really wasn't living. Now I feel so very grateful not only to my sobriety, which I try to maintain day by day, but I'm grateful also for the ability to help other people. I never thought I could be useful to anyone except my husband, my children, and perhaps a few friends. But AA has shown me that I can help other alcoholics. Many of my neighbors devoted time to volunteer work. This one woman especially, I'd watch her from my window every morning, leaving faithfully to go to the hospital in the neighborhood. I said to her one day when I met her on the street, "What sort of volunteer work do you do?" She told me it was simple. I could have done it very easily, she said. "Why don't you do it too?" I said I'd love to. She said, "Suppose I put your name down as a volunteer, even if you can only give 1 or 2 days." But then I thought, well, now wait. How will I feel next Tuesday? How will I feel next Friday? And if I make it Friday, how will I feel next Saturday morning? I never knew. I was afraid to set even one day. I could never be sure I'd have a clear head and hands that were willing to do some work. So I never did any volunteer work, and I felt depleted, whipped. I had the time, I certainly had the capability, but I never did a thing. I am trying now each day to make up for all those selfish, thoughtless, foolish things I did in my drinking. I hope that I never forget to be grateful. Thank you, folks. Until next time, one AA time, one AA place, one AA channel. Thank you.